Welcome to Feminist Utopia. This week, we're going to imagine a world where white feminists fight as hard for the rights of all minorities as they do for themselves. This is kind of a culmination of the previous episodes where we outlined what the problems are with white feminists and white feminism and being nice. And today we are going to talk about some concrete steps that we can take to make sure we're part of the solution and not part of the problem.
The whole episode is a call to action, so there's nothing specific that we're going to say, oh, donate to this organization or look this up. And I do want to stress that there is no perfection required or expected. Benita and I are not perfect. We still make mistakes, and you're going to make mistakes too, and you're going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay.
Right. The biggest thing to keep in mind is just trying to have an open mind. And when you make a mistake and someone points it out to you, being open to that constructive criticism without being defensive, which is easier said than done, but it gets better with practice. So, and there are people that will genuinely use constructive criticism and help you out when they see that you're making a genuine effort.
Yes, and I think it's the genuine part that is the most important, and not being defensive,
Right.
which was a problem on our Facebook discussion.
It is a complicated issue, and a lot of people that have been doing this work for a while still struggle. So this isn't something that you perfect and all of a sudden you can say, "Oh, I'm done. I'm an ally now," or "I'm an accomplice now." It's kind of like a man calling themselves a feminist. You don't call yourself an ally. Other people can call you an ally if they perceive that you're behaving in that way, but it's not something that you should determine yourself. Just like any man who calls themselves a feminist, I immediately suspect someone that calls themselves an ally is suspect as well.
Yeah, you never reach the pinnacle of Wokeback Mountain. And then you plant your flag and you're done. This is an ongoing effort, and I think it's also just as important that other people decide when you're the ally. Other people are also going to decide when you're the offender. This isn't your decision to make, and being open to that process helps you grow.
Right. It's never the offender who gets to decide when they've offended someone. If you've offended someone, accept that and learn and listen and do better next time.
Yes. So I think it's important to recognize that the goal here isn't to get kudos. The goal here isn't to say, oh, I see how racism impacts people of color. Oh, that's bad. I guess that's a good entry level place. But to really move forward and dismantle the system, the primary goal for white people such as ourselves is to recognize how the system of racism shapes our lives and our roles in that system. And then there's how to interrupt the systems or disrupt it. I prefer disrupt rather than interrupt, I think.
Right. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. And we've been talking about allies and mentioned accomplices. It might be helpful to step back and define those terms a little bit. When we talk about an ally, we're talking about a partner in empowerment, someone who speaks out against injustice and supports marginalized groups and individuals on their own terms. I don't mean on the allies' terms, but on the marginalized groups' terms. It means recognizing oppression and standing in solidarity with anyone who experiences oppression, whether or not you belong to that targeted group.
And this reminds me of something that the late Houston activist Ray Hill said. was very wise. He goes, "We're all on the same picket line," and he recognized that through his activism, years of activism, that allyship was important for all groups, and so LGBT needed to be aware of how to be allies to the Black community, and on down this line, we were all on the same picket line, and it was one of the most eye-opening things I think I'd ever heard from an older activist. That that it's not just acknowledging the oppression, it's standing together with them regarding it.
I mean, it's Black Lives Matter supporting LGBT, it's Native Americans supporting Black Lives Matter, it's people with disabilities being recognized and supported by these groups. It's, like he said, we're all on the same picket line. And another important factor of being an ally is to recognize that just acknowledging your personal privilege isn't enough.
Truth.
We need to educate ourselves and find out who we are and how we identify and do some of that unpacking of our whiteness that we talked about in previous episodes, and to educate ourselves about the different identity groups and how other people experience oppression. Because without that information, you're not really an ally. Efforts at allyship can ring a little bit hollow if you don't understand or recognize how someone is oppressed.
And more than even ringing hollow, it comes across as condescension and centering. And going back to one of the pillars of white feminism is putting yourself and your feelings at the core of this. If you're not going to take the time to learn about the people you are allegedly trying to help, then it really isn't about helping them, is it? It's not about building a better world, is it? It's really about you getting likes on Facebook.
It's about you assuaging your own guilt.
Yes.
And like we talked about before, guilt is not useful here, and it's not the basis to begin any relationship. If you feel guilty about your role in white supremacy or perpetuating this discrimination, in some ways, yeah, maybe we should all feel guilty, but in other ways, that's centering yourself. You need to put that aside and truly have a heart to make a difference and help.
Yeah. And again, that you start with education, self-education, as you mentioned earlier.
Right. We can talk about some of the ways that we can educate ourselves. And one of the biggest things is stop tone policing.
It's easy. You just don't do it.
Yeah.
If you feel the urge, go zip it.
Because that's when you are telling someone, oh, why can't we just all get along? Or maybe if you said it in a nicer way, it would be better accepted. What we're really saying is your feelings don't matter and you're dismissing their experience, when if we could just step back and listen, maybe we could learn something.
Yes, and I also think the tone policing, as we mentioned with Ellen, is actively harmful to telling people that in marginalized communities they need to accept the abuse. So there's so many problems with tone policing. It's just one of those things that just chaps my ass to no end. So it's really simple. Just don't do it. Keep your mouth shut. If you feel the urge, go journal about it or something. I don't know. But don't make it somebody else's burden.
Right. We can also understand that other people face struggles that we don't. And in order to educate ourselves, an easy way is to just diversify where we get our news.
Yes.
Check out what people of color are writing, what Native Americans are tweeting. Let's intentionally seek out information and stories from people who don't look like us. A couple good places is like the Humans of New York. I follow them on Facebook, and they just present photos and stories of humans in New York, and it's always interesting. And there's places you can go, like the Root or the Griot.
The Mighty has a lot of articles about people with disabilities by people with disabilities. I find that to be a tremendous resource for stuff I do with Ben. And I love the Root too. I adore the Root.
Even Medium.
Oh,
has different
yes.
people that you can follow. They have different focuses where you can follow African American women. You can follow a lot of different voices. Their HuffPost has different Black voices you can follow, or even just in your book clubs and in your choice of fiction, you can choose an African American author, choose a LGBTQ author, choose something that is outside the normal perspective that you've been reading.
I have a list of books that I will put in the show notes for this about it's also young adult books, and sometimes those of us that are adults like them better in some ways because they're shorter, easier reads. But it basically focuses on writers from marginalized communities. Like there's Hispanic writers, a wide variety of diverse background of writers. And these are books about the struggles of usually young adults in these books, but I'll put that book list in too. If you want easier reads, I hesitate to say that. I find it's emotionally difficult, but they tend to be shorter. And all sorts of really good stuff out there in young adult fiction right now.
And there's, another piece of the puzzle that we can do is teach our children about race. And I'll add my own list of books about race and books for children that feature children with different backgrounds. We've always hoped that there would be a future where the racist Uncle Jimmys would, die off and hopefully not. Or that the people who use the N-word there wouldn't be that segment of the population anymore. I guess there's this fantasy that every generation is going to be more open and less racist than the past. That's what I'm trying to get at. But that doesn't happen unless we actively work toward that. So there's always room to educate yourself and to educate your children and hope that, yes, the next generation coming up will be better, but we can't count on that. We have to improve ourselves now.
As long as we're talking about books, one of the most influential books, I think, one of the books that should be influential for white people is the book White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. We've mentioned it briefly in previous episodes, but it's not a big read, but it's a tough sit down, think about yourself kind of book. And Benita and I had the privilege of actually hearing Dr. DiAngelo speak at a conference. Oh, is it 2 years ago now? And she said some really eye-opening things about allyship and unpacking your whiteness and thinking about your role within the system. It was a great
It
way.
was really uncomfortable.
Oh, it was, I remember you squirming. And boy, did some of the people in that audience get really upset with her. I don't know if you remember. It was a guy from India who got up and started laying into her. And then somebody else on the panel said, you have the colonial gaze here, at which point the whole thing just went south. Just, um,
Yeah.
it was,
Yeah, it was eye-opening. And, just having the conversation
yes.
about race brings up all of this. People are not ready to receive it sometimes. And I cannot imagine having to deal with that on a daily basis.
Yes. Speaking of places, if you want to have the conversation and you think the people around you aren't ready at your Thanksgiving dinner, or, you've got your racist Uncle Jimmy coming over to your family reunion, Surge. I don't know how many of you've heard about Surge, showing up for racial justice. It's a group of white people that are active in unlearning and unpacking and disrupting the system. And there are many different cities.
Yeah, they were a real active chapter here in Houston, and I've gone to a couple of events. And it's an excellent resource.
And no one's going to get up and yell at you there if you need to unpack something. If you say something, quote, wrong, end quote, It's about growth. It isn't about shame.
Another thing that we can do as an ally, and we come back to this time and time again because it is so incredibly important, and it is November and it is election time, and the biggest thing we can do is vote. Vote for elected officials who have a track record of ensuring the most marginalized among us are heard and advocated for. So know the positions of your candidates on these issues that are divided along racial lines, or what is their stand on rights for people with disabilities or the LGBTQ community, and vote accordingly.
I think this is so crucial and it's so simple to do. If you have any doubts that your votes matter, there have been several down ballot elections recently, especially in states like Georgia and Alabama, where it came down to 2 or 3 votes.
Mm-hmm.
And so literally every vote counts. Start voting. I'm from Chicago. Vote early, vote often. I've never personally voted more than once in a single election, so go me. But it's so important to do the research, and especially your school boards. This stuff matters there. If you want to truly disrupt systemic racism, start in the schools.
Right. And I have found the League of Women Voters to be a really good resource for nonpartisan information about local candidates. And they're online. Just look them up, League of Women Voters. They have local chapters. They will help you figure out what ballot is yours, what section you're in. And they always ask candidates to fill out a questionnaire. And honestly, if they don't take time to fill out the League of Women Voters questionnaire, I don't vote for them.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, and League of Women Voters also has a connection to their personal website. And if I click on their website and it's hokey, I don't vote for them. Those are like the two major things. If you're not going to take the time to fill out that questionnaire, and if you don't have a website, I don't think you're a serious candidate. But those are my personal biases.
Well, but it's funny you say that because there's an election for city council coming up here in Seattle. And the incumbent in my council seat hasn't shown up to any of the forums, any of the debates, any of the community meetings, none of that. And she hasn't filled out the League of Women Voters and thing. And everybody's, but she has been serving the city a long time. And I'm like, I can't really, if you can't be bothered, if you can't be bothered to show up, why should I vote for you?
Yeah. And how are you serving the city?
Yes. Well, then I have.
She might be working through the job, but you're not serving your community if you're not listening to your community.
Yes. And so disrupt the system. Anyway, we're in agreement on this one.
Yeah, we digress. But, there's lots of other things you can do. You can make an effort to shop and use businesses of people of color. In Houston, they have something called Restaurant Weeks. And there's 2 of them now. There's a Black Restaurant Week where restaurants owned by people of color have special menus, and it's kind of like an open house, an invitation to come and try these restaurants that are owned by these minority business owners. And it's a great way to try new things and give them some advertising. And now that the holidays are coming up, and we are going to be purchasing more, we can try and make an effort to shop local and know who we're buying from.
Know who we're buying from, exactly. And that's Black Restaurant Week in Houston was one of my favorite things to do when I lived there. And there would be groups of people that would go, and I went to an Ethiopian restaurant. And it was one of the most eye-opening experiences. I'd eaten Ethiopian before, but eating Ethiopian in a big group was really a more authentic experience in terms of how it was served and how people ate, as opposed to just, my husband and myself sitting across the table from each other. So I miss Black Restaurant Week. I tremendously do. Mm-hmm. But it also helps prevent gentrification, which is a huge problem, especially in South Seattle. And so white people move into the neighborhood. They don't use the local businesses that are already there, and they get pushed out then due to rising rents and decreased business because the Black people that use their stores are gone now too. So I'm a big fan of if the system is going to work against them, the least we can do is use our system, our white privilege, and try to disrupt that pattern moving forward.
Because I have a history of sharing embarrassing racist stories, I have another one for you. And this is just about education. So when I was young and didn't finish my tomato soup because I hated tomato soup, now I like it, but whatever. My mom, or if maybe it was peas or stew or whatever I didn't like, my mom would always say, "There are people starving in Ethiopia. Eat your food. There are people starving in Ethiopia." And the first time I had the opportunity to go to an Ethiopian restaurant, I was like, there's people starving in Ethiopia. I didn't even know they had food there. What kind of food do they have from Ethiopia when everybody's starving?
I'm going to tell a racist story about my dad, and I didn't handle it well. I had mentioned to my dad I'd gone to an Ethiopian restaurant in Chicago, and I told him about the food, and he wouldn't like it because it was spicy and mostly vegetables. And he again said, "Well, there's a famine there. This is the late '80s." He goes, "Well, what is there even to eat?" And I just looked at him and thought, "Well, it wasn't always devastated by war and famine." Um, it was just one of those moments, and I didn't say anything because I didn't stop him and try to correct his view or discuss. I just completely and utterly dropped it and changed the subject. Which
Yeah.
leads us to one of those things you can do is in that situation, use your sphere of influence, whether it's your dining room or the boardroom, to call out racist actions and concepts. And I didn't do that.
In my defense, I did do that. I mean, I went to the Ethiopian restaurant with a girlfriend. We had a wonderful experience, and I took the opportunity to learn about the culture. So, I mean, and that's something that we can all do,
Yes.
right?
Although I understand how it can be awkward to confront racist Uncle Jimmy. If I personally, I'm good at that. I enjoy it, and other people don't. And I understand people not wanting things to be awkward, but it comes back to being nice. Are you being nice or are you being good? It's more important to be good.
Right. I mean, and that also follows up when you hear someone telling a racist joke or a homophobic joke. We don't have to laugh. We really don't.
You really shouldn't. It's not you, you can frown. You can kind of scrunch up your nose. I'm really good at that. Did you really mean to say that?
If you are in the place of privilege where you can safely challenge the person that made the joke, you might want to consider doing that. And if you're not in a place of privilege, staying silent is better than the nervous laughter.
Yes, the nervous laughter sounds like consent and approval.
Yeah. So, in summary, I mean, I think it's good to remember that we're going to make mistakes and put our foot in our mouths, and that's okay. This process involves becoming uncomfortable and having an open mind, and being able to take criticism is really crucial in your role as becoming an ally. And we want, there's a list of do's and don'ts. We can do listen and ask how you can help. Don't jump in and take over and assume that they don't know what they're doing. Ask first. Don't expect another person to educate you. That's your responsibility. Yeah.
Especially for free.
And this one is a little bit harder. Don't apologize for the actions of your identity group. I mean, I think that plays into that guilt too,
Yes.
which is not helpful. And the apologies aren't helpful. It's like Debbie said last week. What was it? Don't say you're sorry.
Don't be sorry, change.
Yeah, don't be sorry, change. That's a good one.
Yeah, my kids don't like it, but okay. And don't expect people to throw a parade for you. You're not doing this because people are going to love you at the end of it or people are going to give you credit. Your credit is doing the right thing, and it comes from being able to look in the mirror and know that you're trying to make the world a better place.
Right. And we can't do that on our own. So, seek support from experienced allies within your own identity group. If you are involved in something like speaking up for racial justice, find people in there that can mentor you and help you out and point you in the right direction. And the other thing too is don't selectively support one group over another.
Yes, this is harder than it sounds.
Yeah, it seems like it's easier to be an LGBTQ activist for some people because they are kind of on the upswing and have been making some strides lately. And it seems almost more politically correct to do that than it is to come out and say Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
So, as far as people with disabilities, they're still incredibly discriminated against. And it's hard for them to get recognition, and we need to remember them too.
And we're all on the same picket line, as Ray Hill said. And I've been in situations where, not BLM specifically, but in civil rights oriented meetings where the focus is on a particular group, completely ignoring another group. And sometimes you have to be the person that says, what about this? Especially like straws, for example. There was a feminist group that came out strongly in favor of the straw ban here in Seattle, completely ignoring the problems it was causing for people with disabilities. And then they tried to have all the solutions why people with disabilities didn't really need straws. They needed to do these other things. And it turned into this massive unpacking of just because you understand this particular issue doesn't mean you understand that issue. And sometimes you need to sit down and listen there too.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot to do. Like we said, this whole episode is a call to action.
Oh, yeah. And there's one caveat that we didn't mention that we need to mention, in that if you choose to spend your money in support of some of these organizations, know before you donate who you're donating to and what the money is going for, and do your due diligence in vetting that it's a legitimate organization.
Don't donate to Sean King. Just say that flat out. Just don't. And we should probably do a whole episode on the allyship industrial complex. And I personally tend to donate to individuals directly. Some people call that reparations. I call it helping out people that need a hand. But again, I've done my research. I've watched them. I've read their stuff. It's different. So yes, definitely do the research. You don't always know how they're going to use the money and if it's really going to end up harming the people you're trying to help instead.
Right. So there's the exploitation of allies and allyship. You can pay hundreds of dollars to go to an institute for allyship and get a certificate in anti-oppression, or,
it's just so hair clenching.
It is. Try and stick with established groups that are doing good work. The ACLU. There's tons of great organizations out there. Just know.
Or know the people you're donating to if you choose a path of individuals. There are people that I trust more than others on this kind of stuff. But then knowing that you can't buy your way out of this one, writing a check is just a part of it. And I would say a not necessarily huge part of it.
Right.
I want a certificate of allyship. What do you do with that? Anyway, sorry, I need to unpack that and think about that another time. I'm fascinated. Okay, I'm back. So, thank you for joining us this week. I'm sorry we didn't get to talking about accomplices. We mentioned them in the beginning, but we found a lot of really good stuff to talk about.
Right. And this topic is so complex, and we could really do months of episodes on allyship and unpacking our whiteness, but I think we've got some solid ideas for you to start implementing in your life, and hopefully sparked some interest to do your own research. And we will definitely come back to this issue sometime in the future, but we appreciate your taking the time to listen. And we look forward to coming up with some ideas for what to talk about around your holiday tables now that the season is coming up. That'll be our next episode. And then we have another debate coming up. So thanks for listening, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
If you like our work, please give us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you access our podcasts so others can find it as well. You may also become a Feminist Utopia patron at patreon.com to show your appreciation. Remember, patrons get perks.
And check out our blog and other resources at our website, feministutopia.net. Email us your idea of what a feminist utopia would look like or any questions to info@feministutopia.net. Feminist Utopia is created by Debbie Williams and Benita Malone.